Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. So I have a really cool review for you guys from the brand Hanhart. Originally founded back in Switzerland in 1882, they relocated to Germany in 1902, and they're best known for their historic pilot's chronographs. Now, in terms of type of watch, this could definitely be a pilot's watch. Now, some key characteristics, and sounding when you're looking for something within this genre, of course, you're going to want to find that balance of legibility and functionality. This is their PIONEER Preventor HD12, and after more than 2 years of intensive development, Hanhart and TGV of YouTube's The Urban Gentry channel proudly present the new Preventor HD12. With the introduction of the exclusive HD12 steel, the manufacturer from the Black Forest is setting a new benchmark in terms of scratch resistance of its cases. As an extension of the popular Pioneer collection, the Preventor HD12 fulfills the desire of a three-hand model with a central second hand and a more compact diameter of 39 millimeters. The water resistance is 15 atmospheres or 150 meters, and a screw-down crown definitely make the new Hanhart watch the perfect everyday companion. So definitely great for that kind of everyday explorer, expedition, and kind of GADA type of watch. Now, these go for 1,195 euro, and that's including VAT, and that would be direct, or around 1370 via one of their US authorized dealers, and as configured, that is as configured with the bracelet, or about $200 less on the strap. This particular unit was kindly sent in by Hanhart for this review, so big shout out to them, and yeah, really excited about this one. So with that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, now we can't talk about this new watch without talking about this one right here. This is the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph 38 right next to it, and these two watches do have a lot in common. And if you are newer to watch collecting, some of you might even think that this Hanhart kind of is a bit of a alternative to the Hamilton, and then maybe they took some notes from it. I will say that if you look through Hanhart's extensive historical catalog, you'll find that this dial and handset combination existed for many, many years prior to the MURF ever being fashioned together for the movie Interstellar. And even this watch actually took its dial. It was actually kind of an onset mod before it was actually released as a full model. And it was funny enough because that model was also called the Pioneer. So this style of dial was actually popularized by Hanhart many, many years ago. But to Hamilton's credit, typically this dial was going to be paired with a small seconds subdial or a fashioned to a chronograph with various chrono subdial registers. So, don't oversimplify this and just think, oh, well, Hanhart just kind of came out with their version of the MURF, because honestly, this particular design is very rich in heritage to Hanhart themselves. So this is definitely very iconic within the Hanhart brand, and that is why you can see that they chose to use that historical Hanhart logo, which I think was such a beautiful touch. And there's a lot of differences, and honestly, the differences, a lot of them do, coincidentally enough, make up for things that we found as shortcomings when it comes to the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph in terms of no screw down crown, Here you're getting screw down crown, you're getting another 50 meters of water resistance. And honestly, even if they would have kept it 100 meters of water resistance, just the addition of the screw down crown is enough to make it a much more confidence inspiring feat. Also, you're getting a hardened steel case and bracelet, and you're getting a bracelet here. This is, of course, on an Uncle Straps bracelet, which I absolutely do love. I believe it's called their Senator bracelet, which is just an oyster style 3-link. But now Hamilton recently did release a very variation that does offer a full bracelet. Not one that looks as good as this or as similar, but hey, it is available. So Hamilton is right around under $1,000, and here we have the Hanhart at just over $1,000, but I do think it does offer a whole lot of value. So with that said, we'll focus on the Hanhart for now, and if you are interested in seeing a head-to-head comparison, definitely let me know down in the comments below. So in terms of the diameter, 39 millimeters in diameter, 10.4 millimeters thick, 45.8 millimeters lug to lug, hardened HD12 steel, brushed HD12 steel. Essentially, it's a multi-stage process that provides up to 1,200 hardness Vickers or 1,200 HV without compromising corrosion resistance. And that's typically something, if you are into, let's say, pocket knives, you do understand that there are trade-offs depending on how hard you get your steel. Tool steel is typically going to be much less corrosion resistant, whereas, some of the more corrosion resistant steels are going to be typically a bit softer. So here you're kind of getting around that because at first, essentially the process is they add large quantities of carbon that is diffused into the stainless steel in a surface hardening process, which creates a gradual transition from a hard surface to a softer core. That does prevent brittleness compared to if they were just to use a coating on top without that hardening. So I think that's really cool, and it's honestly a couple of steps above what a lot of brands are doing these days with just putting a clear, DLC or PVD coating, which is very hard, but it doesn't necessarily, have the same effect of when you think of hardened steel. It's just a hard coat. Typically here, you're actually getting something that it meets more, I would say personally, of that definition of when you think of hardened steel. So that transparent, it does actually do, also on top of that hardening process, they do use a transparent hard coating, which is a PVD that's applied to provide additional protection. So I think that's fantastic, and I'm definitely a big fan. Now, getting into the details here, you can see that it does have a beautiful sapphire that does have a low dome. It is double dome, so it's domed on the upper and the lower, so inner and outer side. It is also coated with an inner AR coating. So when you look at this, it's going to be very, very legible, even at harsh angles, as you guys can see here. Now, getting into the bezel, it is fully brushed, a difference from the MURF, which was polished, and I think this looks great. I think it would also have looked good polished as well, but this brushing definitely gives it a more, tool-like feel, which I can absolutely appreciate. The crown is screw down and beautifully signed here, and it's basically going to be kind of the only space of polish. And the nice thing is, when it comes to the tactile engagement with this beautiful screw down crown, because it is actually polished, it means it's not going to have harsh edges. So the actual tactile engagement is quite nice when it comes to unscrewing that crown. And I think it's beautifully sized. As you guys can see, very, very proportional. And that's kind of the tail of the tape here, guys. This is a really proportional piece, and that is extremely versatile. Now, when it comes to the movements, you can't see it, unfortunately, but it does have a gorgeous embossed case back with that old school historical Hanhart logo. So let me hold this open and then just get the camera to focus there. Check that out. So very, very nice. And behind that, you're going to get an automatic Sleeta SW200. This is a no date variation, which does not have a ghost crown position. So good on Hanhart for getting with Sleeta and making sure that they did have that modification done. I can absolutely appreciate that. With this movement, you may have heard of it. It's very popular. It's, it's been an alternative and kind of the main alternative to the venerable ETA 2824 for many, many years. And essentially it has 38 hours of power reserve and 4 hertz. So that's going to be 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of that beat rate. So very nice, smooth sweep on the seconds hand. So one of the advantages of this movement over, let's say, the MURF is that this has traditional functions on the inside, and you can actually have this regulated by a local watchmaker or even by yourself. You can do some manual regulation to it versus the Powermatic movements from Swatch Group, which are not able to do that. Yes, you can service them, which is great, but unfortunately you can't, without some very special tools anyway, you won't be able to get any type of timing zeroed in. So if your timing isn't great out of the, right out of the box, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to improve that unless you send it off to the Swatch Group, which is not the case for the SW200. So I appreciate that versatility, although you are giving up in terms of that extended power reserve of around, 70 or 80 hours at Powermatic, 80 hours, right? Here you're going to get a very standard 38-hour power reserve, which isn't the greatest, but you're still going to retain that 4 hertz sweep versus the Hamilton, which is only going to be 3 hertz. So, that's going to be more comparable to a Seiko movement, whereas here you're going to get that more traditional sweep, and I think it looks fantastic. Now, getting into the dial, let's see it, guys. Gorgeous matte black dial with that historical logo, matte cathedral handset, and Super Luminova C1. So it's going to render very clean and crisp and white in daylight, and I dig it. Now, in terms of the water resistance, again, 15 atmospheres or 150 meters of water resistance, and that is compliant with DIN 8310. So not ISO compliant, but basically that DIN compliance is going to be kind of the Japanese, I'm sorry, not the Japanese, the German variation on that. So, different standards, but they're essentially very, very similar. Now, in terms of the lug width here, guys, perfectly done. 20 millimeter lug width. You're getting the solid stainless steel 3-link bracelet, which does taper down to about 16 millimeters. And, of course, you're going to have this solid PVD 1000 hardness Vickers clear coat on top. It's great. So not quite as hard as the case, but the fact that they have a hardened bracelet as an option, that's saying something. There's quite a few brands in Germany that do hardened cases, and sometimes they won't necessarily always offer a hardened bracelet. Also satin brushed, right, and hardened. So that is another thing that makes it quite special and stand out, even amongst very similarly spec'd or themed contemporaries. So another thing to mention, guys, is you do have, as you guys can see here, screw pin construction. Everything is satinized very nicely, and you do have a dual push button clasp, beautifully signed with that historical logo again, all milled in terms of the folding section, and you even do get 3 positions of manual micro adjustment, as well as an extension, whether that would be, if you're going to take this diving for some reason. I don't think that's what it's for. It's probably more so to go over some clothing if you are wearing this in a colder environment, which makes sense, especially with the aviation theme. Of course, cockpits weren't sealed back in the day. And also another nice thing is, if you are out on the more adventurous route, it's nice sometimes to be able to keep your watch, especially if it's going to be on a steel bracelet, which can get very cold when you're in freezing temperatures. Sometimes you can want to put that over a layer of clothing, right, to keep that off of your skin. So very cool from that perspective. And again, I'm really digging this, and I like the taper. I like the use of the female end link there. I like that they went with quick release spring bars as well. So there's definitely a lot to like there, but let's go ahead and get this on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5 inch wrist, this just wears beautifully. And although 7.5 inches is on the larger side of average in terms of, wrist size, I will say, as you guys can see, it's quite a tall wrist, and round. So it's not like it's super flat and wide and accommodating. Of course, if I do get my wrist a bit too close to the lens here, you're going to get quite a bit of perspective distortion, and it's just going to make the watch seem a lot larger visually than it actually is. So all I do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame so that you guys can get a closer look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And you can see here, beautifully centered here, guys. I'm digging this size range. I mean, for something that it's meant to be, an outdoor, a pilot's watch / everyday adventure watch, I think the 39 millimeters, diameter definitely hits quite a sweet spot. And check out how flat that lays on the wrist. Nice and thin, but not overly thin. I mean, this isn't looking like some watch that was necessarily designed to be thin. It definitely is one where they were being very considerate when it comes to the wear profile. I like the thicker, chunkier links there on the bracelet. It gives it just a certain sense of heft and quality that I can absolutely appreciate. And it definitely resonates with me in terms of reconciling the way that it looks and the way that it feels, which isn't always the case. Sometimes a watch can look really sturdy, but then be kind of missing that heft. And then sometimes watches can also be quite overbuilt and unfortunately a little unyielding. So I think they hit a really nice balance here to where the watch feels very, very solid, very planted. I mean, look at the way it sits on the wrist. Just beautifully done here, guys. But with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Oh, yes. Beautiful Lume here, guys. The application is nice and thick, so maybe on the daylight Lume situation, when you're looking at it, you might feel like it looks a little bit bolder and thicker, but I will say it does pay off in this low light situation, as you can see this. And honestly, as a pilot's watch, you don't necessarily have to have really powerful Lume, but I do like that they went there. They even did add some Lume, extra Lume there on the second hand, so your watch is running. So you're going to see that clean sweep there on the counterbalance, as well as the main body of that second hand. Looks really fantastic against those cathedral hands. And of course, at the end of the day, this is just a printed dial, so it's not like this is a diver, or you should expect any type of diver-like legibility, but still quite impressive, especially within the aviation or even kind of field and adventure genre. But one thing I always like to work in is always going to be that bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what those colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And you guys can see here that brushing is immaculate. It definitely is a higher level than you'll find on, a more basic Hamilton or anything from the Swatch group. There's just a higher level of attention to detail and care in terms of not just the finishing, but also the fitment and the tighter tolerances. That's what you're going to be getting with this beautiful German crafted piece. A little history there on the cathedral hands. Originally, those frames became popularized so that you could have more surface area without having to worry about the Lume cracking, because of course it'd be framed, right? And it does definitely give you a bit of that kind of stained glass aesthetic that you might find on a cathedral. So very cool, and still works really well to this day. Very handsome. You guys know I'm a big fan of these handsets. Of course, carrying over into the Seiko Alpinist line. You gotta love it, and it looks great here as usual. I've been a fan of Hanhart over the years, but there never really was that right model release for me personally. I actually did take a really close look at the Pioneer line with the small seconds offset on there. That one was really handsome, and then they added a bracelet to it, and I was just really pondering that. But once this was released, I feel like it kind of answered pretty much all of my wishes, and I feel like there's a lot of folks that'll probably feel the exact same way. So with that said, let's get into some closing thoughts, guys. On the wrist, super solid feeling with a fair amount of reassuring, well-balanced heft. And I don't want to understate that any. Like, if you once you get one of these on your wrist, you won't forget about it. This isn't some titanium, very modern, type of tech-heavy feel. This feels like that traditional, tough, you know, mechanical tool watch timepiece kind of vibe, and I'm here for it. In terms of model variants, definitely check the site links for current options and availability, but currently there is a blue dial variation, and you know, you can, depending on where you're buying it from, you can spec it either on the bracelet, which is awesome, and you can see it here, which is back ordered and sold out on certain areas, but you can still get it on the leather strap, which I believe is the bund styling. But again, check the links down in the description for current availability and options. Now, in terms of comparable models, guys, strong specs for a German-made wristwatch with heritage. It compares really well against similar offerings from, let's say, somebody like Stowa or Laco. And it really outshines the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph 38, to be quite honest. It doesn't cost that much more, but it's offering so much more. Now, if you really like the Murph just because of the movie Interstellar, then of course that's the watch for you. But if you just like that idea and you keyed into that, like, ooh, that is a handsome, well-balanced dial, I dig the full numerals, I like the old school aesthetic, I like what it could be, right? It feels like a field watch meets pilot's watch, kind of air, land, and sea. And, you know, especially now with this variation, of course, of the formula where you're getting a solid, confidence-inspiring 150 meters of water resistance. I mean, that's up there with the Omega Aquaterra. So, again, this just feels like it competes on a different level in terms of what it's offering. And then, I mean, then you get the hardened steel. And, yeah, I mean, it's just objectively has a lot of qualities, unfortunately, that the Murph doesn't have, which is a watch that I love and I adore. You guys know this from my previous reviews and comparisons with, I mean, that is a watch that I genuinely enjoy. And if you look through my Instagram, you'll find little places and spaces where I've really enjoyed that timepiece. But this just bests it in so many ways. In terms of the bottom line here, guys, the PIONEER Preventor HD12 is a near perfect go anywhere, do anything, or GADA timepiece. It's objectively ultra capable and subjectively handsome from a brand with a rich heritage of true historical significance, which I think is great. And I absolutely appreciate that as a collector. Now, there's going to be other folks that are going to be in the comments and saying, oh, I can get like a factory brand watch, you know, from China that's going to have, you know, all the same this and that for less money. I don't think you'll find one with a hardened steel, but you might find one with a hard coating on it, or, you know, a similar aesthetic, or you might find some straight up homages to the Murph. And some of them will be well spec'd, some of them will be well finished. But the difference ultimately here is like this Pioneer dial, this particular aesthetic is intrinsic to the Hanhart brand. So there is something that is absolutely valuable about that, that, you know, you can't necessarily put a price tag on, in the same way that, yeah, the way a Submariner looks, or the way a Flieger looks, or the way a Seiko Diver looks. Yes, you can buy other watches that have similar aesthetics, but they're not, you know, from that core creator. So I think that's something that is extremely special about this watch, and kudos to TGV and of course the team at Hanhart for putting together such a real, I mean, it's a dream of a watch. So let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.